Hey everybody, welcome to Painting for Pleasure. I'm your host, Tony Visco. Today we're going to talk about staining colors. We're going to talk about a number of things, but staining colors is going to be part of that, and granulating and non-granulating colors, the characteristics of watercolor, and a couple of other things as we go forward. But number one, let's just start with staining colors, because staining colors are a concern for all of us. And what staining colors simply means is that once the color gets into the paper, it's not liftable. And I'm going to explain why staining colors aren't liftable as opposed to colors that are readily liftable. These are staining colors. I'm going to start with, usually when that happens, the colors that are staining include things like all your phthalo colors, alizarin crimson for most of the cadmiums, permanent magenta, Prussian blue, Hansa yellow, Hooker's green, indigo, Payne's gray. Those are just a number of them. So why do some colors stain and other colors don't? It has a lot to do with the particle of the pigment. You know that watercolor paper has generally, other than really smooth hot press watercolor paper, it has hills and valleys. And when you put watercolor on the paper, what happens with that watercolor is it absorbs in the paper, in the fibers of the paper. Well, staining colors, interestingly enough, stain in a lot of cases because the particles that we're talking about, the particles of the pigment, are a lot smaller than particles in non-staining colors. So because the particles in the pigments are smaller, they tend to penetrate the paper more rather than just lay on the surface. And now that's interesting because, you know, when I didn't know this, and I'm just passing this on to you, but it's stuff that as you start to research some of this, the different colors and how they react, you pick up a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I've just thought that was amazing, that the reason for it is because the particles tend to be a little bit smaller. I don't want you to think that I'm brilliant here. I mean, I learn like you, and that fascinates me. So staining colors have a purpose, and they can be very exciting. They can be brilliant. You can do a lot of stuff with staining colors. They're great for glazing, which basically means that you're putting one color down and then you're letting it dry thoroughly and you're putting another color on top of it. But quite frankly, generally, as we talked about, staining colors are pretty much, in most cases, all the CADs. Cadmium colors are pretty much all staining colors. Permanent magenta, something like this. Permanent magenta here, staining color. It's a quinacridone color, a quinacridone color, I'm sorry, it's a quinacridone color. Cyan blue. You know, here, Windsor emerald. The Windsor colors would be staining. Windsor green, Windsor blue, cadmium red. Here's a Windsor yellow. Usually if it's Windsor something, it's staining. Okay, so generally, again, so that you get a little bit of a better understanding, all of the Windsor colors, all of the phthalo colors, if the colors have phthalo in the name, it's going to stain. Alizarin crimson's a staining color. Permanent magenta, as I said. Prussian blue, nice dark blue, staining color, absolutely. And again, Hooker's green, which I could probably take out and show you, but I just wanted to let you know that those are what we would consider staining colors. Now let's do this. Let's take a little bit of each. I'm going to put a little bit of each down here on this paper, and we're going to start to work with them. Okay, so the way I'm going to actually do this is that as long as you can see what's going on, I'm just going to actually take the tube of paint. I opened it up here. And let's just put out a little bit of paint right on the paper. That color is Hooker's Green. Actually, it's Hooker's Green Light. So we'll put that out. I know it may be a little bit of a waste to do this kind of stuff, but it's okay. We'll just take a look at. It's part of what we are, part of the lesson. Here's a color called Windsor Emerald. All right, now it's interesting enough, and I can tell you just by looking at that color, that color is also not only probably a staining color, but it also has a lot of binder in it. Binder is what makes things a little bit more opaque. The more binder paint has in it, the more opaque it's going to be. So that's emerald. That's a Windsor Emerald. Here's the color called Windsor Green. Now this was Hooker's Green Light. Okay, this is Windsor Green. We're going to just play around with this. Let's do a cyan blue. Here's a Windsor blue. This is just to show you what's going on with some of these colors. Okay, and what I'm going to do is once I get these out here, I'll just wet my brush and draw them down in a line, and we'll get to see them. Let's go into some of the reds. Here's my cadmium red deep. Now maybe these may be old. I gotta be careful about this thing. Here's my magenta. Of course, you guys know it because I use it. I can put some out, but my alizarin crimson. Actually, let me do this. Maybe I can just pick a little bit up right here on. Let me pick a little bit up right here off the. And put it in there. Here's my alizarin crimson, so I'll just put that in there because I'm just taking it off my palette. Okay, here's cadmium yellow. All right. Cadmium lemon. Hello, lemon. Whoops. And here we got, here's a Windsor yellow. So anyway, this will just give us, let's see if that works. Some of these paints I've had for a long time, so I'm going to have to play around with them a little bit. Anyway, what is the idea behind this? Okay, so the idea behind this is to give you a feeling, generally, of what happens if you take these staining colors. This is Hooker's Green, all right? So let's just take Hooker's green and we're going to just bring it down here. Okay, Windsor Emerald. This has got a lot. This is going to be a sedimentary color, maybe staining too, but it's going to have a lot of binder in it too. What did I say what this was? Windsor. This is Windsor. This is Windsor Green. Nice colors, nice and bright. Okay, my cyan blue. I don't think this is going to be a staining color, quite frankly. That's an interesting color for me, but this one will be. Whoops. Whoops. I may have to muddy that one up. I'll have to put that out again. I'll put my permanent magenta over here. Let's just get... What's my cadmium red? That's my permanent magenta right here. That was cadmium red, but not good. Here's my alizarin crimson. Okay. And let's bring us into my yellows. Cadmium yellow pale. Oh, that's a nice yellow color. That's nice and brilliant, isn't it? This is cadmium lemon. Okay, and that's one's a yellow, and I think we got, see this? That's all binder. My pigment didn't come out on that one. My paint might be old, so let's see if we can get a little bit more pigment out on that. Let's try this. There you go. This is, by the way, see this? That's the medium. That's a carrier. That stuff there is gum arabic, and that gum arabic is inside and acts as a carrier to keep this from drying out. Here you go. Okay, that's that without the carrier. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with my red. I had some cadmium red in here. I'm going to just move it over here because get some pigment out. Because what's happening right now is that some of this stuff is so old. I've had these paints for a long time, and see again, that's all just nothing but gum arabic with a little bit of tone in there. Right. See that? A lot of gum arabic in that stuff. A lot of carrier in that. Okay, anyway. So you can see how nice and brilliant a lot of these colors are. But we have to let those dry thoroughly so that you can see what happens when we try to lift them up. So now that I put that down there, we're going to talk a little bit more about the colors and what they have to offer. So now that we have those colors, I mean, I have to let these, we're going to try to let these thoroughly dry. Now this, I do not think that that's going to thoroughly dry over right there at all. I think we're going to end up having to get another color down there, because that seems to me that it's mostly gum arabic, mostly the carrier. You can actually tell it. It's got a. Let's just get rid of this. No, that's not going to come up at all. Let me just get rid of that. So if your paints are a little on the old side, which these tend to be, you're going to get a lot more juice out of the paint when you first start to put it down, and it's going to be a lot harder to dry. What I'm going to do actually is, I'll take the let me put a little bit more of my cadmium red down there, and I got other cadmium red, so let me just hold on. Let's just get that out there. That's just a tough tube that I picked up. I'll get a better tube here in a second. Okay, here's my cadmium red deep. Now you'll see the difference in the color right now when I put it out here. Okay, there's my cadmium red deep. And what I'll do is I'll just take my water, again, come in here, and grab the paint and pull the pigment down. Okay? Alright. Cool. Okay, so now what I want to do is do a couple of things here. As I said, this has got to dry thoroughly. So let's just talk a little bit about watercolor in the processes here, because watercolor has many characteristics to it. A lot of watercolor is transparent, a lot of it is opaque, some of it is granulating, some of it's staining. And what does that mean? Granulating colors will clump together. You'll see some of that. The cerulean blue tends to be a granulating color. They'll tend to, all of the molecules will tend to clump and form little pockets here and there. So some of it will be a little lighter and some of it will be a little darker. Opaque watercolors are just that. They are opaque. They do not have any transparency to them. You're not going to be able to see through them. The reason that they're opaque is because there's more binder in them. So when we describe staining colors, it means basically that the paint is, once the paint is dry on the paper, it's difficult or almost impossible to lift off. Heavily staining watercolors will leave a permanent mark on the paper. And then there's light staining colors, which still can be lifted off, but it'll leave a slight tint to it. And the reasons, again, why some of the staining colors, some colors stain more than others, is really determined by the pigment, as I said, and the surface of the paper, obviously, and what it's painted on. But staining pigments are usually extremely tiny, and they're able to get into the fiber of the paper more. This is in contrast to non-staining or granulating colors that have bigger pigments, bigger particles, and they'll remain on the surface of the paper. And with non-staining colors, you can literally scrub off the paint and have the paper turn to white again. So you've seen that happen a lot of times. That's what happens when we lift. When we lift colors, what we're doing is we're basically lifting those off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let this dry thoroughly, and then I will come back once it's thoroughly dried, and then I will show you the difference and show you what happens when I try to lift these colors. Okay, so what we're going to do now that it's thoroughly dry, people, is we're going to just take some tape. I'm going to do this so that it makes sense to do this. I got a nice hard piece of paper so it won't bother the tape. The tape won't bother it. Alright, so let's just put a piece of tape here. Okay. And maybe we'll put a piece of tape here. About right here. All right, so we got a nice wide swatch right there, which I will now take some water. We'll do this way. And we're going to show you exactly what happens with staining colors. So we'll take a brush. And this is something that you can do at home. Alright. So let's just take and see what we can do, if we can see what we can do to lift that stuff out. And what's going to happen. Now this is all thoroughly dry, so we should be okay. See what can lift out, what stains and what doesn't stain. By wetting it. Alright. Wetting it. Some of this is going to be lightly stained, some of it's going to be heavily stained. I'm doing them one at a time so that you can get a better feel for it, all right? My blues. My reds. I'll do the other red too. My yellows. All right, looks pretty good. All right, let's see if we can lift this out. This probably, you can see when I add water to the gum arabic, that's the carrier. Watercolor is made up of binder and along with gum arabic, so here you go. All right, so we got some stuff that's lightly stained and more hot, more staining, but just so here we go. Well, let's lift this up. You can see. I'll take that one off. And we'll take that one off. And you can see, you should be able to see basically what happens in here with regard to staining colors. Some of this stuff lifts out pretty good. Yeah, even though they were staining. They're cadmium colors, but you know, we're saying most cadmium colors stain. Not all cadmium colors stain. But the yellows seem to be doing pretty good. There's a little bit of yellow residue right there. This and this one here lifted out pretty darn good. This is alizarin crimson, which stains. The red stains a little bit. This is a Windsor blue. These are phthalo colors. That one there and that one there. And the green. See, you can see the stain, in that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can actually see it. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can focus this in a little bit more. Well, I'll move it down into this area here. Let me see if I can actually come down. Whoops. And you can see the stains and some of the stuff that didn't stain. But these are generally all staining colors. They're nice and bright. You can see how nice and bright they are. Whoops, let's get it back down in here. Let's actually go back. Let's go back the other way and just go zoom out. Zoom out. There you go. And go back and put this all in place. So what I've done is I've zoomed out, and we've got some nice bright colors that are happening on here. Now here's the other thing about staining colors. I also said that applying staining colors, you know, one of the things that we can do is we can sort of take a color like this and add a color over that for glazing purposes. And we can just sort of take, let's just take and say we'll glaze. Let me just take this and we'll glaze we'll take this green here, okay, and we're going to take and we're going to run a glaze over those. Let's run a glaze over those. You can see what happens. Now you can see, here's what's interesting, is you can see that, see how this is crackling in here, and crackling in here, and crackling in here? That's because the paint underneath it is not really paint. The paint underneath it is the carrier. It's the gum arabic. But look at this. I glazed over this color here, and I took the green. You can see this. The green over this green here is a little darker. It's the same green. I put the green over this green here, and you can see that it's changing colors. There's a slight difference in the color between the green that I put over here and this green here. This one here, it's sort of transparent. You're seeing right through it. And so the dark is coming through this. See what happens? These are the kinds of experiments that you have to make. What you want to do is you want to go through the process of doing these to create sort of different things. Let's take, I put green over this. I wonder if we just take cadmium red and do the same thing. We need a cadmium red with a little bit of water in it, obviously, because we want it to be as transparent as possible. But look. Okay. This is called glazing. When you take one color and you put it on top of another color to create a third color. Look at how this gathered right here. So, but the colors that I'm dealing with here are bright, vibrant colors. Unlike the earth tones, I mean, my standard palette, for instance, most of the colors that I use are colors that you can lift. These I don't use. I don't use other than alizarin crimson, and maybe I don't even use cadmium red that much. But other than that, you're usually not going to find me using most of these colors at all, because I can't lift these colors effectively because I'm always going to stain the paper. So I want colors that what I like to work with. I like to work with non-staining colors to get most of my work done. And then what I will do is I will take some of the staining color and put it in. Now I don't usually use green. So the Hooker's green and emerald green and Windsor emerald and the Windsor green and so forth. I would normally mix those colors. But here's what's interesting. You can look at this thing here. You can see what happens is that dark color just punches right through. So those are all interesting kinds of things. So let's go back and talk a little bit more here about granulating and non-granulating colors, because watercolor paints can be pure and they can be lively, or they can be soft and watery. No matter how you paint, watercolor has several unique colors and color qualities that make it different than any other medium. You know, watercolor paints are basically dried, ground up pigments that mix with binder and they're put in a tube or a pan. You know, the pan paints will do the same thing. They're mixed up. And when they're mixed with a binder, that binder holds everything together. And so, and because watercolor papers, or watercolor paints actually, are used with and react to water and paper and certain pigments, they behave differently. Certain pigments will always behave differently depending on what they're made of. Now, non-granulating pigments are those that react smoothly and evenly with water. They tend to cover the paper equally and with little or no variation in the color and the texture. Non-staining colors. What would we consider a non-staining color? Here, we'd consider this a non-staining color. Cobalt blue. What else is a non-staining color? How about French ultramarine blue? How about cerulean blue? Let me wash out my brush good. Pick up some cerulean blue. Yeah, let's put it down. Okay. That's cerulean blue. I'll tell you what's a non-staining color. Let's put it down. Burnt sienna. All right. Here's burnt sienna. We'll just put in a little bit more. That color right there. Yellow ochre. Okay. Let's actually try my cadmium. Well, this is cadmium orange. This may stain, but we'll put it down anyway because I do tend to use it from time to time. Probably belongs up there more than anything else. And I've recently. Well, here I'll tell you what else. Let's just do this. Any of the browns, for instance, if I were to use raw umber, I'm using right now sepia. We'll put that down as well. Let me throw Pyro Red in there because that's part of my regular palette. All right, we'll put a little bit of Pyro Red in here as well. And what else do I use? Let's take the colors that I use a lot of. I use Naples Yellow. Now, Naples Yellow is more of a solid color. It's more of a granulating color. It's got a lot of, there you go, Naples Yellow. And you've seen me use lavender as well. So let's just take. I'm scraping some lavender off my palette here. I probably should use some fresh lavender, but we'll just scrape it off my palette and I'll put it down here. Isn't that pretty color? Beautiful color. I don't know what. Okay, so basically those are the colors that oh, New Gamboge, of course. I forgot all about my New Gamboge. Because I ask everybody to use New Gamboge, don't I? I have to wash out my brush. Okay, and that's my New Gamboge. All right, I got a little bit of stuff in there, but it'll do. All right, so we're going to let that dry. So those are my colors that I generally use on a regular basis. They're non-staining, and we're gonna do the same thing with this. Now you can see that some colors are more transparent than by virtue of what I did. For instance, if you have a pigment like this that goes over a color and you can see the color through it, you know it's transparent. It's not opaque. So an opaque color would cover that totally, cover that so that you wouldn't be able to see through it. I remember when I told you this in the beginning, non-granulating pigments are those that react smoothly and evenly with water. And you can almost see that right here. And they tend to cover the paper equally, again, with little or no variation in color or texture. Other pigments that we use are granulating, which basically means that, again, the water is added to the pigments. They separate from the binder and settle into valleys on the paper. They dry in clumps, sort of. And it leaves a grainy texture. So if a texture or an uneven wash is needed, granulating paints can be used for that kind of an effect. And granulating paints are also separate when mixed with other colors. They also separate, I'm sorry, when mixed with other colors, and they do some wonderful things. You know, a few more frequently used granulating colors would be things like cerulean blue, which we put down over here, and the ultramarine blues, which are over here, and raw sienna and burnt umber and those kind of things. They're excuse me, they're granulating. Now you know that basically, and we'll just touch bases on this. You know, there are transparent colors and then there are opaque colors. So while all watercolor, all of it, are transparent, because that's the nature of watercolor. When used with water, they become transparent. Some are naturally more opaque than others. Some are naturally more transparent. Some are naturally more opaque. In a transparent color, well, lets the white of the transparent colors let the white of the paper show through, while other pigments are denser and they have more of an ability to cover the paper, cover what's underneath. Now I'm using quality. All of these here are quality paints. Now you and I have talked about in classes and so forth. You and I have talked about low quality or student grade paints, and basically any low quality watercolors are mixed with more of a binder. There's more binder in it and less pigment, and they'll appear chalky, and they'll appear more opaque. They won't give you the translucency and the transparency that good watercolors will give you. Opaque colors lack vibrancy. Remember that. Opaque colors lay down on the paper and they don't have the vibrancy. And if they're overused, man, they can absolutely kill a painting. So I tend not to use opaque colors often, and generally speaking, other than say like a raw sienna, which is I don't even use raw sienna, but raw sienna is one that I probably could use. But instead of using raw sienna, what I do is I use yellow ochre. So all of this stuff is actually, by the way, labeled on the tubes of the paint, so that you can basically see them. Some of the paints are opaque, pretty much solid, semi-opaque. They'll allow you to see through things a little bit more. So you got to test these. I'll tell you what we'll do. Let me see if I can do this. Hang on a second. I've been hunting. What I was doing is, while I'm letting this dry, I was hunting around for a Sharpie, a black magic marker, because I want to just run a line. Let me see if I can get where's my straight edge here? So let me just sort of take this, and I'm gonna run the line right through here, but I'm gonna do it another way too here. We'll just run a dark line. Let me get another marker. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna sort of run a line over here. Got a black marker that I just put down there, and boy, that stuff's strong. And then what we're going to do is we're going to let that dry. In the meantime, this stuff here has been dried. We're going to do this. I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Let me put this up here. I'm going to take my tape. Well, I guess I'll use some new tape. And we're going to put the tape. I'm going to put the tape down here, just like I did before. The tape. All the tape does is really help me create a nice straight line, straight edge. Now I can use tape on this particular paper that I'm working with here. I can't use it on a lot of the stuff that I paint on, but I can use it on this this paper here, because this paper is a hard, durable paper. Right, so what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to get my brush, and we're going to end up doing exactly the same thing that I just did. If I can find my brush. Well, I can't find. Yeah, here it is. So let's get some water and come in here, and we're going to end up saturating this whole thing and wet it nice. All right, we'll again saturate the whole thing. Now, out of my palette that I used, you can see which colors are staining. And like I said before, the staining colors that I used are what? My alizarin crimson, my red, my pyro red. This one's cadmium orange, but everything else pretty much came out. This actually did too. This is, I don't understand, this should, let me just go. Alright. So I'll lift this off. Alright. Right, and I really should let this, I should have let this dry first, but you'll get the picture. Alright, and you can see what happens. Pretty much all of this stuff comes right out, except for this color here and this color here. But look at that. See, my lavender pops right out. My yellow, my New Gamboge, no problem. It's got a little bit of a yellow tint, but very light. My Naples yellow just is nice and clean. It's like the white of the paper, 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 the white of the paper. Okay? All of these colors are non-staining colors, and you can literally lift them right off again to get back to the white of the paper. Now, I want to do something over here. I want to show you what's transparent, what isn't. So you see this black line that I've got over here? I'm going to take my colors, and I'm just going to come down, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to do this. Alright, so what I just did is I took my green, right, which is my Hooker's green, and put it down. Alright, we're just going to go here, we're going to go mix my colors. I'm going to take the water, clean my water up, come in here with my Windsor Emerald. Come in here with my Windsor Green. My Cyan Blue. Okay, my Windsor Blue, which is a phthalo color. Let's go to my. Let me wash it out here. I've got some blue in there. This is my cyan, my permanent magenta. My alizarin crimson. I'll take a little bit of alizarin crimson out of this here instead. Yellow. These are the yellows that I had up here. My cadmium yellows, my chrome yellow, lemon chrome lemon, it's my cadmium red. Yeah, let's do this. Yellow ochre. My burnt sienna. My Naples yellow. Sepia. My lavender. Cerulean blue. My French ultramarine blue. And one more, my cobalt blue. You know what, I'm going to do one more than that, after that, all right? Because it's just what I carry, and I usually put opera in here. So let me add the opera. Okay. Now here's what's interesting. You want to know what opaque colors look like? Let me move this down and let me go and see if I can. I don't know if you can actually see it. But let's take a look at that. Look at how opaque these two colors are. My Naples yellow and my lavender. Super opaque. I'm covering the black pretty much with those. My cyan is close, but most of the stuff that I've got down there, watercolor is a transparent medium. Watercolor is by nature, because it's watercolor, tends to be transparent. These things are good for you to do. You really should get in there and work with this color and do these exercises. They're extremely important and very helpful so that you'll understand what you can do when you apply the paint, the pigment to the paper, what the results you will end up getting. So you can see as this dries, it's drying more and more. The results are that you can see that black line pretty much through all of the colors that I put down, with a couple of exceptions. You know, and the more solid, the more sedimentary that color, the harder the more it's going to cover. Now, in this case over here, I put my black line on top of this color. But even when I put my black line on top of my sepia, it's sort of blended in together. All right, it blended in together, so it's close in terms of value. Now, yeah, this is just a basic color wheel. I don't know if they make a bigger one in here. Let's see. No. All right, but essentially, if we take a look at a color wheel, and these are readily available in the art supply stores, and in terms of how to mix colors. But what you have is basically you got three primary colors, right? Let's do it this way. You got yellow, blue, and red. Now, yellow, blue, and red are complementary colors. We've talked about this in the past. What you have, yellow, blue, and red are primary colors, and what is opposite yellow, which is is a secondary color. What is opposite red is a secondary color, it's green. What is opposite the blue is a secondary color, which is orange. And basically, orange is simply made up of 50% yellow and 50% red. Okay? So if you got yellow and red, you got orange. If you got yellow and blue, you got green. Secondary colors. You got blue and red, you got a purple color, right? You got a blue-purple color. Okay, so again, primary colors and secondary colors. And that color which is opposite the primary is a complementary color. Okay? So, the bottom to this is, when I put this out, if you take and you say, okay, I have my yellow. My yellow is warm. If I go and let me do it another way. Let me start with red. My red is warm. If I really go to the right to oranges and yellows, I'm actually getting warmer. My yellow is my colors are getting warmer as I come to the right side of this, right? But as I go to the and as I continue to go around here, they can become greens and green blues. So they start getting cooler. All right? And as the blues start to get into the reds, they start getting warmer. So it's the colors, the warm and the cool is always in relationship to one another. So if you just go around the wheel, if you go around from here to this way, I mean, yellow is a little bit warmer than red. Blue is cooler than red. You know, so you have to look at it from a point of view of what colors you're working with and what colors are in relationship to the other colors. That's the basics of warm and cools. For instance, here, this will give you an idea. Warm and cool colors. These colors are all warm. They're all in the red family. All right? These colors are cool. They're all greens and blues toward the red family, but still cooler than the red family. The other thing you got to remember is dark colors tend to be harsh colors. So you want to try to keep the stuff as bright as possible. Colors can be warm and cool. They can be transparent or opaque. They can be staining or sedimentary. As an example, if you take a look at a color like burnt sienna is generally temperatured warm. My burnt sienna here, see my burnt sienna here? It's warm color. It's transparent. You can see that it's transparent. You can see through this. It stains slightly, very slightly. You can see it right here. Actually, there's no staining in this one at all, but it really is very, very slight. And it has some sedimentary to it. Okay? So you have to look at it from a point of view of each of the colors and what they'll do. A Windsor color, for instance, the Phthalo Windsor red, or Phthalo red. It's a very warm color. It's basically, it's slightly toward the violet side. It's very, very transparent. It's also very staining. It literally doesn't have any sedimentary to it at all. There's no ability for those particles to sort of gather together. Where cerulean blue, if you take a look at a cerulean blue color, it's a cool color. It has a slight cast to the greenish side. It's relatively opaque in terms of its color. All right? It's relatively opaque. It has no staining value at all. It doesn't stain at all. And it's got a fair amount of sedimentary to it. So, again, what you really need to do is to sort of look at these colors, analyze the colors, see how they work out. See how transparent they are by doing stuff like this. And what I'll do is I'll if I can have a chance and dig up those sheets for you, I'll try to get them to you so that you have a fair idea as to what you can do with them. It'll give you those sheets. Those of you that already have them, they're good tools to use. I'm not sure any of us really use them, quite frankly, but I gave them out to everybody in my class at the Plymouth Center for the Arts, and we'll talk about it. If you have them, fine. If not, I'll send them to you. So let's just talk a little bit about the dimensions of color. You've heard the terms hue, value, and intensity. Those are the three dimensions of any color. Now, hue refers to the specific name of the color. You know, the sky is blue, the grass is green. I mean, it just references the color itself. You know, daisies are white, sunflowers are yellow. It's the general name of the color. The value, however, references the color's lightness or darkness. And you and I have talked about value being probably the most important part of what I consider the painting itself. I mean, people get wrapped up in color. They get so concerned and overly concerned with color that they forget that a painting has to have good lights and darks to it. Well, you can get a red that's a dark red or a light red, and that is what I'm talking about. The value of the red, whether it's light or medium valued or dark valued. Let's just take the cadmiums. You can have a light cadmium red, a medium cadmium red, and a dark cadmium red. Okay, so my point is, value becomes an important part of it. And the value of the paste is the lightness and the darkness of that particular color. The more water you use with that color, the lighter it's going to be, because in watercolor, water is your lightener. The more you use pigment, excuse me, the more you use pigment straight out of the tube with no water, will be the darkest of that pigment. And that pigment is going to be, value-wise, darker than if you add water to it. Water will be your lightener. If you're dealing with oils and acrylics, white paint. Titanium white, lead white will be added to a particular color to determine whether it's lighter. And you would add then, to get it darker, you would add black to it to get it even darker. Now I don't use black, we don't use white. What we do is mix colors. We mix by using our colors collectively together. Sepia or burnt sienna with French ultramarine blue, and you'll create a nice rich dark. And if you use it out of the pigment, almost like right out of the tube with very little water, that value is going to be very intense, very dark. If you add a lot of water to it, that value is going to be light. So just get that straight in terms of where we're going. We have hue, value, and intensity. What is intensity? Intensity really refers to the chroma, or the saturation of a color. What do I mean by that? The strength or the weakness of the color. A strong color is intense. If you take a look at some of these colors that are up here, for instance, this color here, this color here, this color here in yellow, very intense. Very, very, very intense. It's got a lot of strength to the value of, to the color itself. It's a strong color. It's vibrant. The weakness of the color is when you water it down, or the color tends to be dull. For instance, the weakness of this would be considered a weak color. By Naples yellow as an example is a weak color because it's not intense in and of itself. It's a very light color, but it tends to be a very weak color as well. So again, keep in mind those three dimensions of all colors. You're dealing with the strength of hue, which refers to the color itself, the name of the color, value, which is the lightness and darkness of a color, and the intensity, which is the chroma or saturation, the strength or the weakness of a color. So I hope that helps out. Okay, so let's try a couple of experiments here, because I also want to talk about color in relationship to the other colors that are around us. So let's do this. Let's take a little water, and I'm going to put in here. We're going to just put in here. Let's mix a neutral. Now you've heard me say this before, so I'm going to take my French ultramarine blue. I'm going to make two marks here. I'm going to take my French ultramarine blue, and I'm going to mix it with my burnt sienna. And remember, French ultramarine blue is a little bit on the red side, right? My burnt sienna is a little bit on the warmer side because it has red and yellow in it. So look at this nice, here, look at this nice rich color that I just made. This is a neutral gray. Look at that, beautiful, beautiful gray. All right. So let's do this. Let's just take, I'm going to make a mark right here of my gray, and I'm going to make a mark right here. All right. Same gray. Okay, we'll put this here. Here, let's actually do, I don't know, maybe we'll do another one. Let's do another one. One. Here, I want you to see what happens when you have, you know, you guys talk about, let's say, adding color. Well, let me just do this 4 boxes here. We'll do another one right here. Okay, now this is all the same color, right? Okay. So I've got 4 blocks of the same color. Now, what I gotta do, I shouldn't say that. What I need to do now is to let it dry thoroughly. So I'm going to help force this to dry by using using my hair dryer. So hang on for a second. We'll be back. So what I did just now is I thoroughly dried out these boxes. What I want to do now is I'm going to take, this is just an experiment. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I think hopefully it'll come out the way I'm thinking it'll come out. But let's experiment here. Let's take a light color. Let's take my Naples yellow. And I'm going to run my Naples yellow around this color. I have a polluted brush, so it's just not fair, I don't think. Hopefully I gotta get a wash out my brushes here. Okay, so I just made a box around that, right? Okay, let's take my Pyro Red and do the same thing. Pyro Red. Okay. A strong red. My head, I hope my head's not in the way. No, my head shouldn't be in the way. Okay. How about, I don't know. Let me take one of these. Let me take one of these greens. Yeah. I want to use this green up here. We'll put it over here. This is that Windsor green. Okay. Okay, I think maybe that might be enough. Maybe we'll do, let's do this red. I'll tell you what, let's do a red down here. Let's do a red here. We're going to do the same thing. I'm using the same red. I'm not changing the red at all. And we'll put one over here. Okay, so we have 4 boxes, 4 reds, right? Okay. So let me wash out my brush while it's drying. And we'll clean my palette. Let me clean out the water bucket. Might get some fresh water. And we'll dry this again. And I'll actually, you know what? Yeah, sit. You might as well hear it. We'll just get this nice and dry. No reason for me to shut this off. Okay, now we're going to take a color. And let's just do yellow. Let's take a yellow ochre. Again, these are experiments, so we're not sort of worrying too much about them one way or the other. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to come out, but I can tell you this. Here's my yellow ochre. When you do this, you're going to appreciate how one color affects the other color. And this is important. And the reason it's important is because some of you guys put your color down thinking it's going to be against another color, and it's going to do a certain thing, and it doesn't do it. So let's do that. Let's do my, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do this one in my orange, a cadmium orange. Okay, and maybe what we'll do is, how about, I don't know what color blue this is, but this is kind of cool. This is peacock blue, I think. It's a staining color. We'll just put it in here. Suppose we could have done it in green just as well. Okay. So let's try it. Okay, so now we're looking at color. So we used a neutral here, and we used a red that was pretty bright here. That's the color red that we used there. It's all the same color. Color against another color is going to change how it looks. Take a look at the black against this green. If you were to squint, you can't see this, but what I'm saying is this. This is lighter. That's actually, this one here is probably because of the lightness around here, tends to make the black, or that gray, a little lighter than this particular gray right here, or that one right there. Those solid colors around there tend to darken that black. This is seems to be lighter than this because it's affected by the white around the paper, and this is lighter because it's affected by the lighter color around it. Same way with the red. You know, you put the same reds in there, but look at this. Look at the difference between how that looks against this versus how that looks against that. That tends to be more vibrant, and it would be that way. It's logical, but as you put color against another paint, another color, it changes. That's the same color in every one of those, but it's affected by the color that surrounds it. So that's one of the reasons why you have to understand what color does before you apply it to your painting. Because it's not going to be bright unless you can get that bright, unless you put that down there so that it is going to be bright against something that's light. You know, I mean, here, I don't know what, I mean, this, obviously, it's watercolor. So let me just add that in there a little bit. And while it's wet, it's going to be brighter, right? Because it's wet, it's glistening. But as it dries, the color dulls out. Look, as it dries, I mean, it's nice and bright. And once you start to put a drying agent to it, look what happens. It loses its brilliance. But against the white, it's still lighter than some of this other stuff. Now, it's interesting to see that this actually looks, even though this color is against the white area, this actually looks lighter than this color against the darker. And it would. Because if you darken it around there, that's going to lighten that up a little bit. This doesn't, because that's a neutral. That's a little different. So the light, it's going to be lighter basically around the white, the lighter areas. But this red is going to appear, let me rephrase that, it's going to appear more vibrant against the blue. It's going to have a more energy against that blue. Well, that's interesting. Why? Well, maybe because, and I'm going to see if I can verify this right now. Let me find my color wheel. Maybe because it tends to set this up a little bit more. It's not quite the complementary, but it's just to the left or the right of the complementary color, the red and the blue. So maybe that has something to do with it. But it's interesting to see what happens with all of this stuff. How one color against another color will affect it. And if I did this very transparent, if I did this as a watery, very watery, like that. All this is pyro red. Here, let's just take the pyro red, water it down. Pyro red, water it down. Water. And we'll do the same thing. We'll dry it. See the difference? See how much difference it is between how intense and dark this is, and with water, how much? This is the same color. This color and this color are exactly the same color, but very loose, very watery. And again, if I take and I run color around it, and we'll take cobalt blue. Actually, let's do this. Let's take a watery cobalt blue. A watery cobalt blue. Okay, on that side and on the bottom. These are just experiments. And maybe we'll put a heavy cobalt blue between the two. Heavy cobalt blue. Heavy cobalt blue. Heavier cobalt blue. And then we'll take cobalt blue without any water at all. We'll just make it really heavy on this one. This is it. This is the last experiment we're going to do today. Okay. Box darker. Now let me dry that. Sorry for the noise. I know that it can be a problem, but we'll just, rather than shut my camera off, I just let it. And I'm going to just make this a little bit darker right now by adding a solid pigment in here. Now that it's thoroughly dry. This is pigment right out of the tube. To darken that up. Cobalt blue, guys. Okay, close enough. Okay, my point is this. This color, and this color were all the same. And you watch me put it down. Yet this tends to look darker, and this tends to look darker, and this tends to look lighter. This is the lightest because of what's happening around it, and as you put the darker colors around it, it helps to pull this up a little bit more. Color, in and of itself, on the paper alone is one thing, but whenever you put an additional color next to it, it will always affect the colors that they're next to. So, with that in mind, and again, experiments, playing around, see, you can hardly see that gray in there at all. I hope that you, again, got something out of this. It's just basic color theory and basic color practice, from transparent colors to non-staining colors, to staining colors, to sedimentary colors, to working out relational colors that in relationship to one another. These are very critical exercises to do to help you to become a better painter. So that's it for today. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you next week and we'll get started painting again. Thanks. Bye-bye.